We begin our show with a man who the American Trial Lawyer magazine calls America's political prisoner number one. That's Don Siegelman, the former governor of Alabama, who returns to federal prison today to resume his 6.5-year sentence. He was convicted on bribery charges stemming from his appointment of a campaign donor to a non-paying government board. However, his supporters say his only crime was belonging to the Democratic Party in a state with a Republican majority. Siegelman's supporters say he was the target of a political witch hunt, in part orchestrated by former Bush administration Deputy Karl Rove. They claim the federal prosecutors and presiding judge decided to destroy Siegelman's career. Siegelman was once touted as a possible Democratic presidential candidate. In Alabama, he served in 4 of the state's top elected offices. He was governor, lieutenant governor, attorney general, and secretary of state. Siegelman's supporters already include 100 former states' attorney general, both Republicans and Democrat, as well as former presidential candidates Al Gore and John Kerry. Last week, he actually attended the Democratic National Convention in Charlotte, North Carolina, not as a politician or candidate, but as a man seeking a presidential pardon. Pace Law professor Bennett Gershman says Siegelman's case is, quote, one of the most egregiously bad faith prosecutions by the Justice Department ever. Siegelman's already served over 9 months in prison, a month in solitary confinement, 3 weeks in a maximum security prison. He now has to report back to federal prison in Oakdale, Louisiana by this afternoon. For more, we're joined by Democracy Now! Video stream by former Governor Don Siegelman. He's joining us from a hotel room in New Orleans on his way to jail. Governor Siegelman, welcome to Democracy Now!
Thanks, Amy. I'm delighted to be with you this morning.
It's hard to believe you'd use the word delighted today, but can you talk about why you're headed to jail today?
Well, no one wants to go to prison for something that is not a crime, and especially one orchestrated by Karl Rove. Everyone remembers the 8 U.S. attorneys who were fired by Rove during the Bush administration because they would not pursue political prosecutions. Well, the U.S. attorney in Alabama, appointed by Bush, vetted by Rove, pursued a political prosecution. And this is the flip side of that congressional investigation that stirred up a stink about how Rove was using the Department of Justice as a political weapon.
Explain exactly what happened. Talk about your time as governor, though you served in many different official capacities, elected positions in Alabama, and then exactly what happened to you.
Well, I was raising money to get a state referendum passed that would establish a lottery so Alabama's less fortunate kids would have a chance to go to college for free. Jack Abramoff, in his book, admits that he put $20 million of Indian casino money in Alabama, first to defeat me in 1998 and to defeat the lottery campaign in 1999, and then to defeat me again in 2002. There was a confluence of both the casino interest to get rid of me, to target me, and to stop me, as well as Karl Rove and his best friend and his best friend's wife, who was the U.S. attorney, as well as Karl Rove's client, who was the state attorney general. I was raising money, and I had asked a gentleman to raise money for this state referendum. He did, and later I appointed him to the same board on which he had served through 3 previous governors. It's interesting to note that all 3 of these previous governors had received contributions directly from this CEO. I received a contribution, but it went to a referendum campaign, yet I was targeted and convicted for bribery. The other interesting note here is that the judge lowered the standard by which juries can convict to not an express quid pro quo or an explicitly asserted quid pro quo, but in my case, an implied quid pro quo. So now we have a standard in Alabama where people can be convicted not on evidence that they actually got together and decided to swap money for favors, but to allow the jury to assume or to imply that there was such a deal.
I want to turn to Craig Unger, author of the new book, Boss Rove, Inside Karl Rove's Secret Kingdom of Power. He appeared on Democracy Now! A few weeks ago and talked about your case.
Well, I think Siegelman's absolutely right. I mean, it's not the prettiest part of the American political system, but it's sort of standard operating procedure that sometimes campaign contributors get political appointments. And in Siegelman's case, Siegelman personally got $0. He appointed a contributor to a non-paying state-appointed position, and if he's to go to jail, George W. Bush gave appointments to over 100 campaign contributors and was not prosecuted on any one of those. And it really has been standard operating procedures. Hundreds of ambassadors throughout the years, and one administration after another, have been campaign contributors. And what you see that happened, and this is really under Rove's aegis, is selective prosecution. And I think there's nothing more damaging democracy than when laws are applied only to one group. And as I began to research this, I saw that, you may notice that the mayor of Alabama was indicted or investigated. Mayor of Honolulu was investigated and just before an election. Mayor of Miami, mayor of San Francisco, and all in all, I found mayors of 12 major cities. There's Cleveland, Detroit, Portland, Oregon, New Orleans, Chicago, Philadelphia, Pittsburgh, Memphis, and Dallas. What do they all have in common? They are Democrats. They are governors and lieutenant governors from 5 states, Alabama, Hawaii, Michigan, New Jersey, and Maryland, and on, over 200 politicians, and 85% of them are Democrats. And I think there's no data to suggest that the Democratic Party is 7 times more corrupt.
Soon after we talked to Craig Unger, author of Boss Rove, he went to the Republican National Convention in Tampa, and he had this exchange with Karl Rove, which was captured on camera.
Hi, I'm Craig Unger from Vanity Fair.
Yes, of course you are.
And I also have a new book coming out next week called Boss Rove.
This is where Unger is going to flack his book. Go ahead, Unger. Launch away.
Before and during the Republican primaries on Fox News and in the Wall Street Journal, you were highly critical of Sarah Palin, Donald Trump, Herman Cain, Rick Santorum,
We don't read questions here. Just be quick.
And Gingrich. Were you doing that intentionally to help Romney's chances, and did you discuss it at all with Roger Ailes?
No and no. And I was complimentary of some of those same people at different times. But if, for example, when Donald Trump went out and Rick Perry went out and embraced the birther issue, I was critical of it. Unger's got an interesting book. I'm responsible for the murder of Mike O'Connell.
But did not say that.
Well, comes very artfully close to saying it. He also depends upon a nut named Dana Jill Simpson, who claims that I personally got her to investigate Governor Siegelman of Alabama. And this is going to be an entertaining work of fiction. I wish you all the best with it.
Misrepresenting.
No, I'm not. No, I'm not at all.
That is Karl Rove being questioned by Craig Unger. Dana Jill Simpson. Governor Siegelman, your response?
Well, my daughter had the opportunity of confronting Karl Rove at the Democratic National Convention, where he yelled and shook his finger in her face and told her that I should stop using his name or he was going to sue me. Well, I obviously have not stopped and will not stop using his name. My response to Mr. Unger's book is that, and my quest to get people to sign this petition to the president by going online to Free Don Siegelman or Free Don, or to my website, donsiegelman.org, is because this case is not just about my freedom. This is about America's freedom, about restoring justice and preserving our democracy. It is to underscore the fact that we cannot allow people like Karl Rove to take over the Department of Justice and use it as a political weapon, which is what happened during the Bush administration. And so this case, in my request to the president to pardon me or to commute my sentence, is much bigger than my freedom, although my freedom is important to me, but the freedom of this country is more important to all of us.
In 2008, Governor Siegelman, Karl Rove was questioned about his involvement in your case by George Stephanopoulos on ABC's This Week.
To be clear, you did not contact the Justice Department about this case?
I read about, I'm going to simply say what I've said before, which is I found out about Don Siegelman's investigation and indictment by reading about it in the newspaper.
But that's not a denial.
I heard about it, read about it, learned about it for the first time by reading about it in the newspaper.
Governor Siegelman, that's what Karl Rove says.
Anybody that believes Karl Rove, we could sell them a bridge, but there is no question that Karl Rove's fingerprints are all over my case. From the initial investigation by his client, who was the Attorney General, to the prosecution by his best friend's wife, to his partner who was involved in stealing my election in 2002. His bagman, Jack Abramoff, was pumping a bunch of money into my race to defeat me. There's just no doubt in my mind. There may be a doubt in his mind, but there's no doubt in my mind that Karl Rove did direct the Department of Justice to pursue me.
And yet your conviction was upheld on appeal. Can you explain why?
Well, I can explain that, we had 113 state attorneys general. We had law professors who wrote the book on constitutional law, literally, who all were appealing to the United States Supreme Court because they saw that this area of the law, one, is already so murky, and it was less clear at the time when back 13 years ago. So, we have the best constitutional law professors, attorneys general, both Republicans and Democrats, all saying that what I did was not a crime. And, we have the 11th Circuit Court of Appeals upholding the lower court's ruling where the court had lowered the standard by which juries can convict on bribery. Most of the time when you hear about a politician and bribery, usually you hear about the politician taking money. Well, there was no allegation in my case that I received a single penny or benefit from this contribution at all. So this is a very unusual case.
Don Siegelman, you're headed to jail today. You've been traveling from Birmingham, Alabama, where you live with your wife and your 2 children. When do you enter the jail today, and how long do you expect to serve?
Well, I've been sentenced to 6.5 years. I will enter the prison before 2 o'clock this afternoon. And, how long I stay there depends on really whether your viewers will get online and sign my petition at donsiegelman.org, and whether the president understands and takes an interest in my case. I am hopeful that the president will take an interest after the election.
President Obama and you were at the Democratic convention. Did you get to speak to him?
No, Amy, and if I had, I would have talked to him about how to win this election. I wouldn't have talked to him about my case. It's not appropriate, I don't think, to bring this issue up until after the election. So I did not have a chance to talk to him, but wouldn't have talked to him about my situation even if I hadn't had an opportunity.
Don Siegelman, I want to thank you very much for being with us. Former Democratic governor of Alabama, returning to prison today before 2 to complete a sentence for his federal government corruption conviction. Critics say he's the target of a political witch hunt. We will continue to follow this case. Thanks.